for being here with me. Would you please introduce yourself and tell people who you are and what you do?
I'm terrible at intros. I am Ahmed Baba. I am, aside from being a friend of Melissa and we've collaborated on projects together, she's great. I work on Rant Media, where I'm a co-founder, and we do a lot of disinformation work, where we expose disinformation, we combat extremism. That's what we're really focused on. At the moment, we used to do a lot of, I personally documented the Trump presidency over the last 4 years, partially why I have no hair up there. And also, but now we're doing more disinformation focused stuff, and we're doing a lot of journalistic focused endeavors. And we also have a community where we invite our subscribers in, and we have this really cool hybrid media company situation going on here. So that is my really jumbled introduction of who I am.
So good. I really love what Rant has turned into, because of course I've been following you for several years, and so I really love how the company has shifted and changed over time. I think it's just remarkable. So
yeah, we keep just moving with the political moment,
Yeah, and I really love your membership community too. I think it's really incredible. So I'm super happy to have you here today. Part of the reason I invited you to talk to me for this series on identity is actually because of an interview that you and I did last year about feminism and what it means to be a feminist. And one of the conversations that we had that you brought up was this idea of you talked about sobriety.
Yeah.
You talked about your path to sobriety, and you talked about being a person of color, and I just think, and being a feminist, and it really made me wonder. I wanted to take that conversation a little bit further, and I'll make sure we link that into the comments to that video. But how have your many identities shaped you throughout your life?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's my first most noticeable identity is being, Black man, and that obviously has a lot of impact on my worldview and how I see and perceive reality. And it's really there's that. There's being son of immigrants. There's being a man generally. There's being just an American. Like, there's so many, like, such a culmination of identities that occurs. But I'd say, mostly being, Black in America, especially, really is what pushed me towards doing media. Because I was 19 when Trayvon Martin was killed, and that kind of moment really started and let me see how the media really shaped reality. I saw them, criminalizing the kid, and he was only 2 years younger than me, and he kind of looked like me at the time. And I grew up in the suburbs too, so I could relate. And it was just really one of those things that kind of made me want to, it kind of pushed me into really an obsession with the news and media and the political moment at that time. In like 2012 was when it really ramped up for me. Obviously I paid attention before, but my identity really, it's something you can't really ignore, right? So professionally and personally, that's just on the professional side, but obviously on the personal side, it's an endless effect.
Yeah, totally. And I think that you're bringing up such an interesting point about how these things go together, and how we make up so many different parts of who we are, right? And I think sometimes, and this is just a personal thing that really irritates me sometimes about progressives, but we think we're supposed to be one thing, right? Like, and we don't take into account the kitchen sink of what the very different spaces that we all inhabit and come from. And I'm wondering, why do you think we're so concerned about classifying people?
Well, I think the original intents of the classifications were obviously devious, in a separating fashion, right? Like, the idea of race itself isn't an actual thing. It's something that was created in order to obviously, discriminate and do various initiatives. But we've taken kind of a sense of pride, right? So like when we are in these specific culture or specific gender identity or specific racial identity, a lot of us have taken pride in what we are, and then especially when it's one of those things where people being classified when you have no choice and you're being classified, it kind of makes it so you have to kind of fight for that interest group's existence, right, to exist. And I obviously, in an ideal world, I would prefer there were no labels, or there was no classification, and we could just be all the human race. But at the moment, when there's certain races and certain identities and certain classifications of people that are fighting for, that are under assault, essentially, their rights are, the moment, it's, we got to fight for that right. So in order for us all to be equal, so we can be in a post Star Trek level classification less world, but the moment, that's what it is.
Yeah. And I think that's such a really incredible, especially because of your work in the media. I think it's a really interesting perspective. I'm actually wondering, how have you noticed that people talk about identity in the media, and in your experience, what are people getting wrong about identity formation, and what do you wish people really knew about identity formation, especially in the context, because you and I are Twitter friends too, so like, we have a long relationship of messing about on Twitter, and like,
Yeah.
and Rant is an online media company.
Mm-hmm.
And so what do you wish people really understood about how the media impacts identity formation, and about identity formation from your perspective?
About how people perceive their unique identity, right? Like, essentially, I think, at a broad level, media, and it's even bigger than news media, right? If we're talking just culturally, movies and everything, it's really given an effect. Like, I remember when I was younger in the 90s, especially, there's no black superheroes, there's no, it has a really intense effect on how you perceive yourself. Like, there's obviously identity politics, which is a different topic, which I don't like the term really, because it really kind of is just politics, because everyone kind of has their own interests based on their identity. But aside from that, I really think media, and since it's the lens through which people perceive reality, whether it's movies, whether it's TV shows, or just music videos, or music generally, it affects your behavior. It affects the way you create your own identity, whether it's as a black person. I remember when I was growing up, there was a certain way I was supposed to act, or perceived as acted, and people would tell you, you don't act black enough, or how every black person's experienced that, even if you are, what I'm saying, like, from different angles. And then there's also just different pressure levels that come from media. So I really would think that I don't like how in the past media has really played into stereotypes. I would say that I think the media could do, especially now, a better job highlighting the broader variety of identities within various cultures. I feel like they're doing a better job now broadly, but like, especially in the beginning of this decade and the last decade, really trying to make it, they really propped up the stereotypes of each specific culture or race or gender identity. They would really play that up, whether it was in movies, and it would make you feel like you needed to be that.
Yeah.
And it would make you, or if it wasn't how you were, then it would affect how others perceived you within that identity. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of more. I'm happy with what I'm seeing things go. There's more representation, more representation within the people creating the media. So therefore, there's just a better overall depiction of that, of these identities. I know it was a long-winded answer, but
no, it's really good, because I think that so often people really, they think that the way things are being reported is real. Like you just said it.
Yeah.
You media is the lens through which people perceive reality. I love that so much, because it is so damn true.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting. I've been watching this in our school board races. I don't know if you've seen that school board races all over the country are blowing up, because there's this movement to unseat pro-LGBT, pro-choice people of color that are sitting on school boards. I mean, and in Oregon, it's been bananas. Like, these quiet little school board races are like completely out of control. And I've been involved in a campaign for an Indigenous woman who has been on the school board. She filled a vacant seat midterm, and now she's running for office. And it's the way all of a sudden the media has transformed this race has been so bananas, because the reality that's getting reported in the news is not real. Like, it's really not real. And so I just really love what you said about that, because I think that we make assumptions about people's identities and how they are formed because of that interaction with the media.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're right, because especially the way they distorted this specific race. I haven't seen the examples of it, but just how you describe it, it sounds crazy, and it kind of sounds how we see traditional media. Really, I mean, obviously, how I feel about more right-leaning media. I think is much bigger. I don't want to generalize. They're much worse at this. Every time I watch Fox News at night, I see they have to fit in some kind of black crime. It's like they go out of their way to find, or where can we find the black person that committed a crime today, and let's highlight it on the national stage. But yeah, it really affects the way people perceive themselves, and that's even because obviously it's one thing about how other people perceive you, but it's most important how you perceive yourself. And if you think, oh, I need to be a certain way, but I'm not really this identity because the media never show, I know I'm this, but the media never represents this version of what I am. So therefore, am I really being, so luckily, because of just the democratization of media and like TikTok and all these other, there's so many ways. Like, for example, here's one example. It's just a narrow example, but so anime, right?
Yeah.
When I was younger, it was kind of nerdy, right? To read manga or do that. And, when I did it in middle school, there wasn't that many kids doing it, especially not many black kids doing it from what I could see. And now it's anime is the thing. All these young people, Gen Z loves anime, and black culture, black kids love anime. And it's I didn't know. I thought it was only black kid on the planet that liked anime at the time, right? And it was just, and now, but because of this democratized media, because of TikTok and YouTube and these viral memes, now you can see that there's a representation of every form of that your identity comes in out there. And therefore you feel kind of validated. And I know that's where these communities, community building comes into play. And that's why I think social media has done a lot of good. Obviously, it's done a lot of horrible things, but on the community aspect and bringing people together, I think that for people's self-identity recognition, I think that's done a pretty good service.
Yeah, I do too. Although I still think anime is kind of geeky, but that's just.
Well, hey, tell that to Gen Z, because they are.
Oh,
I don't watch. Yeah, I don't watch it anymore. That's the thing. I stopped watching it because I did think it was. I was like, oh, well, I need to stop. If no one else is doing this, let me leave that in middle school. I think you might want to
get back into it, Ahmed. Apparently, it's quite.
Apparently, it's the thing. So if I want to be cool again, I gotta go back to do what I stopped doing because I thought it was uncool at the time. So it's just funny.
Speaking of that, so over time, of course, the way we think about our identities and the way we feel about our identities, it changes over time.
Yeah.
So what is the strength of understanding multiple identities?
Well, I think it allows you to, just because in my opinion, I don't think there's a static, or just a fixed version of the varying identities. I see myself as kind of just a guy who, or as a black man who just has different interests and opinions, and I think one of the things about identities evolving over time is just that you have to have that versatility and self understanding, because I know identity is a big question right now, because there's an offset, there's a other side to this too, where there's people who's real identity politics we kind of saw on the other side of this with white supremacy and some of the stuff Trump was doing to kind of make people further secrete in there. There's a certain danger to being too I would say I'm thinking through multiple things at once right now. That I have multiple points trying to be made at the same time here. But when it comes to specifically kind of reconciling with your multiple identities, culminating and evolving over time, it's just being able to recognize that they don't necessarily have to contradict each other, you know.
Yeah.
You can be like a black man and be a proud American, right? So like those are, and they could be the same, that you don't have to really separate a lot of, right? Like it can merge into one identity is what I would say, because I actually don't see myself as having multiple identities. I see myself as having one, in which all of them culminate. So I guess that was why I was having kind of a hard time thinking about it in a plural sense. So I was trying to grapple different things in my head, but really I see myself as having one identity.
I think that's really cool because, a lot of my clients that I work with when I'm doing coaching, they all say that they've heard throughout their whole life, I'm too much this, I'm too much that, too loud, I take up too much space. I mean, I've heard it 3 times already today. I just took up too much space, and they made me be quiet. And
that's just wrong.
Starting to say, I know, but what you were starting to say is there's a certain problem with being too fill in the blank, to whatever. And I think that's because we problematize the way people identify who they are and the entirety of their being. And that upholds these structures of patriarchy and white supremacy. As long as someone else is too much of whatever it is they're too much of, the rigid structures of control get to keep perpetuating themselves.
Yeah, and I also think there's something to the once you you have a new identity or form a new identity. I know there's a lot of trans people who are coming out and they have a new identity, or if there's someone who comes out or any of these other scenarios, then they kind of like might attach too much to certain labels, and I think it's one of those things where if you can allow yourself, like I really see identities as being, like I said, kind of a one identity, but a multiple, culmination of different ingredients, so like different. So, I care about Sierra Leone, for example, because my parents are from there, but like, I wouldn't want to segment that, because if you allow it all to kind of culminate into one being and still, and not, because like people will assume you think a certain way based off specific identities as well. There's all these societal factors that come into play. But you're right. If I think really what it comes down to is just owning it and owning whatever you are, and not thinking you need to. You're contradicting yourself if you have multiple identities that you identify with, right? Because you can be a complex human being, and I know that's a really controversial statement to make, but you can be complex.
You can be complex.
And it can be nuanced.
Ahmed Baba, mic drop. You can be complex. I love that you are a culmination of different ingredients. I can hear the blog is churning about the recipe of being who you are and all the little things that go into that. I'm really thank you for that. That is a key nugget. What are your favorite books, podcasts, or shows about one of your identities?
Well, my favorite book, I'd say, about one of my identities is, it's going to probably be cliche, but Dreams from My Father, Barack Obama's first book, just because I related so much to his specific identity crisis he had, because we had very similar high schools too, apparently, both party animals in high school. So I identified with that, and then kind of like trying to leave that in the past. But mostly he had this identity struggle of, he was half white and half Black. I was obviously, both my parents from Sierra Leone. My mom's very light skinned as well, but like mostly because of the way I've carried myself my whole life, I didn't act like the average, like the media representations, right? I didn't act like the stereotype that they try to perpetuate, right? So I felt the same kind of things he felt, where he was told, I remember when he was first running for president, and I remember Al Sharpton, who I like now. At the time, he was a little problematic.
Yeah.
But when he said like Obama wasn't Black enough, right? And that was something I could relate to, because I've heard that before. Obviously, I never get that now. Nowadays, the Black community everyone understands, like, you don't have to act a certain way to be a part of a community. You just got to like represent that community, like, as everything I do, with Rant, we push Black Lives Matter, we push for my community. But and hearing he had a specific anecdote in that book that discussed how he did, was told, white people would say, "Oh, you're not like the others,"
Yeah.
and because the race white would say, "Oh, you're not like the other black people," and then some black people would say, "Oh, well, you're not hood enough," because he's from Hawaii, but I kind of lived in Northern Virginia, so I kind of related to that side of the story, and I'm trying to figure out, how do you own the whole book is just an identity crisis story of him coming to terms with that. I mean, I had my father around, so I didn't relate to that aspect, but just the idea of trying to figure out who you are and figure out, like, every black person has to wrestle with what it means to be black in America, whether you can be patriotic and still recognize the history, which I personally am, which I love because I love America, but I still recognize what was done and try to fix it. So that book, I would really recommend. I don't know if you can hear my dog, but she's going crazy up there. She's co-signing what I'm saying.
She's super excited. She's with you 100%.
Yeah, she's like, "You're speaking truth down there. I can hear you."
That's awesome. I have a surprise question for you.
Okay.
What is your most favorite food ever in the whole world?
Oh, this is a tough question.
All of you say that. All of you have said that.
Why is this the hardest question you've asked? You've asked me about identity, but the food question is the one that is tough. It honestly depends on how I'm feeling, and I'd say probably right now, because I haven't had it in a long time, I love me some Peruvian chicken. I love Peruvian chicken, and I'm just speaking about it right now. I'm just gonna have to end this interview short and go run and get some, because Peruvian chicken at this today is my favorite food. It all really depends on my mood. What about you? Let me put you on the spot. What is your favorite food?
My most favorite food of all time is called chicken surprise. Okay. And because my mom made the recipe up, and it is the food that I associate most with my mom, and awesome. And her nurturing me. And so I love chicken surprise. And it's like cream cheese with onion, like chives and chicken. And then it's wrapped in a crescent roll dough. And then it's dipped in butter. And then it's dipped in breadcrumbs. And then it's baked. And then you put cream of mushroom soup on it.
Oh my God. No wonder it's your favorite. It sounds incredible.
And she used to make it with these frozen green beans that had these little almond slivers in them. And that's what she used to do it with. And it was like, I love it.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
That you are going to get some Peruvian chicken today because it makes you happy.
Yeah.
So I have put the link to Rant in the comments, but how can people find you, sir? What's the best way for them to find you?
So I'd say the best way to find me is on Twitter at Ahmed Baba _. So Ahmed Baba _ at Twitter. And that's where you'll see me just probably after this interview blown off a bunch of steam and talking about all the craziness going on in the world.
All the awesomeness happening in the world. It's so good. I'm so happy to see you, my friend.
Great to see you too. Thanks for having me.